Hi, I'm Bianca Lugo for SUNY New Paltz here at Utopia Studios for the Environmentally Speaking panel.
Yeah, what started, I will admit, it started out in the early 90s, in late 80s, where we did lots of what I call adventure for adventure's sake, which I encourage. I think everybody should do that if you can, especially when you're younger, because you learn so much about your limits, teamwork, the world, etc. And we did first ascents of rivers in Chile and China, and we climbed things that had never been climbed, often because why would you? You know, we did did the first ascent of a tributary of the Yangtze, and we got done with it, and we thought, well, it's clear why no one ever did that, because it was stupid. You know? But it was great adventure, and you learn a lot, etc. But I've been fortunate. I figured out what I wanted to do when I was about 15, which was to write and to travel. Completely turned on, not by writing, or not by traveling, but by reading. And I've kind of followed that course. But in 1990, I think my second book was called Saving the Earth, and it was 14 different environmental problems and the cause-effect solutions too. So I've always had environmental backstory to all of our adventures. But it really changed when I started getting this funding from Geographic to do this 10-year-long project that Lydia described, this Ocean's 8 project, where we literally went around the world one continent at a time, looking at the relationship between man and sea on some emblematic coastline. And we went to the Aleutian Islands, the coast of Vietnam, French Polynesia, Croatia, Gabon, Bolivia, Tasmania, Antarctica. I'm probably forgetting one. But our carbon footprint, other than flying, which is a big one, our carbon footprint's pretty small, because it's generally a small crew, 3 or 4, maximum 5 people, and often we're kayaking, which is self-propelled, so there's no fuel involved. And once in the Altiplano of South America, which is the high desert, we actually dragged kayaks. We walked with them 2,400 miles, and obviously no carbon footprint other than our own heavy panting. But during that process, Lydia's right, we used adventure. You know, we were going around the world making these films about these beautiful places, but if all I was going to do was talk about the beautiful places, I didn't feel that was enough. You know, I think it's actually irresponsible today to make these documentaries without a powerful environmental backdrop.
When we started making environmental films, Race to Save the Planet, 20 years ago, there seemed to be a lot more openness. That was for PBS, and PBS was very open to us telling all kinds of different environmental issues in that one series, including climate change in 1990, which was kind of incredible. And but then as a lot of documentary makers for television started to gravitate toward cable television, Discovery and National Geographic and now Sundance Channel, by environmental documentaries, but they're reluctant to have a hardcore message. It's the difference between light green and dark green, and we have a hard time getting dark green on the air. They really want light green. They want to make sure it stays entertaining. The ratings don't suffer at all with an issues-driven film. And so every now and then, when you get a film out that actually does have some environmental content, there's another problem. We had this with A Year on Earth, you know, after getting an Emmy nomination and it aired all over the place. You know, that 90-minute film that took us 3 years to make it's gone. You know, it's basically available on a DVD website somewhere, but that's it, it's over. And those messages, they didn't resonate as much as we wanted. And that's when I made the choice to go to the Gore climate training, which I did in January of '07.
I was writing actually a vampire story, and my friend gave me the book Silent Spring, and he must have known that it would touch me. And I read it, and I was so, this was 1989 or something, I was so saddened by it that it actually threw me on this course that's been sort of difficult, because I also just want to be a filmmaker, and yet I'm so passionately discouraged by the course of human history that I always end up putting messages into my movies. Now, No Telling is a movie I made in 1990. That's about vivisection, which is, you know, animal experimentation. I got very obsessed with all of these issues, and I would go to lectures by Jeremy Rifkin, who's sort of a modern thinker about really our society and the choices that we're making. And I just feel all of my films address those issues of the choices that humans make. I was interested in philosophy as a kid, so even though I make relatively pulpy films, I feel like it's a great way to engage people in a story and get them to think afresh about what we basically take for granted. And that's the thing about horror. It has the ability to make you realize how lucky you are not to be being pursued by a guy with a chainsaw at its simplest. So there is something philosophical about horror that tries to re-engage you with the gifts of life and daily life. So that's
and
sort of
fear.
And fear. First of all, fear is, of course, the motivator, and the Republican Party knows that. And this is something that we have to be aware of as we engage in life, as we listen to advertising. You know, if you don't use the deodorant, you simply will be ostracized, quite honestly. And so luckily, Colgate has the product for you. This is all just a huge scam that and it's funny, by taking out the politics of our environmental shows, they really are doing us a disservice. For one thing, they're infantilizing Americans, like you can't handle the truth. I mean, this is a tragedy that is in the service of consumerism and making us into iPod-wearing zombies. So once again, it all comes back to horror, you see. I feel that it's a great way to engage people, and you know, the kids who like to see the scary, violent stuff, I think it's great for them to receive these messages. I've made a film called The Last Winter, which is about oil drilling in the Arctic, but it's really about climate collapse, and everybody's going slowly crazy, and in a way they're just suffering from an immense guilt and despair that overwhelms them. So that's the kind of jolly film that I like to make. But I made this film, No Telling, and there's an environmentalist in it, and I wrote in the press at the time, the couple of articles that were written about it, I wanted to have an environmentalist be a hero, be an action hero. And it's amazing, it's not caught on. This is 1990. Do the math, that's what, 20 years. I still haven't seen it, and it's interesting. There's something, we need to change the paradigm of what we consider heroic. And I always use the example of a hybrid car, which I bought when it was absolutely the very first version of the Prius. And we need, as artists, and it's not propaganda, this is coming from the very depth of my soul. You need to show the heroism in sustainability. This is macho. My car doesn't take gas. That's macho. We have to change, or this would be the agenda, to use the arts to reawaken, take back the narrative.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm a line producer and executive producer, and I typically deal mostly with production and logistics and very little with the content other than to facilitate and service the director and the producers to get it on the screen. But what we're seeing now, and I've been very active in supporting and creating sustainability within the productions that I work on very early on, before the studios actually jumped on the bandwagon. And I've seen a lot of change from early days of executives saying, oh, that's really nice that you're recycling, thank you so much, to, okay, we have an entire department that will handle sustainability on all of our films. So it's definitely come a long way, and there is hope, and I do have a lot of hope for the future. And what we're starting to see in regard to content is this idea of behavior placement. Very similar to what product placement might have been, where you're placing a can of Coke in somebody's hand and we're advertising Coca-Cola. They're now, a lot, especially in TV, they're talking to the writers and talking about what the habits of some of the characters would have, to whether it's driving a Prius or composting or drinking from a reusable water bottle. And you're starting to see a lot more of this infiltrate into films and television. As a matter of fact, on the current film that I just wrapped, I had a director who was very supportive of all of our sustainability efforts, and we were making a movie about a bicycle messenger, and there was a strong message of cycling and as an alternative form of transportation, but it wasn't the theme, it wasn't the main theme of the movie. So we tried to, I personally tried to infiltrate where I could green themes. So